Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mike McMahon, and I am the Executive Director of the Hymn Society of the United States and Canada. And today it's my pleasure to welcome and to have a conversation with Tina Schneider. Tina is the Library Director at The Ohio State University in Lima, and she's a professor with the Ohio State University Libraries. She has a very interesting background academically. She has a bachelor's degree in music, a master's degree in musicology, and a master in library science. And it's interesting how as we talk, you'll learn more about how she has put those two interests together in her career. She's made pretty significant contributions to the Hymn Society, beginning her contact with the Hymn Society as a Lovelace Scholar a number of years ago. She has served as a member of the executive committee. She was director of research for 6 years, during which time she began the Emerging Scholars Forum, which has been such an important component of Hymn Society conferences over the past several years. She was also the guiding force in the Dictionary of North American Hymnology, and she worked with hymnary.org to merge those databases and to create the guidelines that helped that to happen. Her research interests have varied over the years, but recently she's been involved with researching Spanish language hymnals. So we'll talk about all of that and more in the time ahead. If you have some comments you'd like to make along the way, or if you would like to ask a question, please feel free to put those in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat during our conversation today. So, Tina, welcome. It's good to be with you today.
Good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I'd like to kind of start by kind of talking about your first experiences of getting involved in music. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Involved with music. Well, I started piano at a very young age. My first piano lesson, my mother liked to tell the story of how I burst into tears and would not play. But then afterwards, it went better after that. And just grew up playing piano. And in high school, I did not grow up in the church, but in high school, the choir director at the local UCC church asked if I would be interested in joining. She had a daughter my age, so she'd known me most of my life. And my piano teacher was also the organist at the church. And I knew many of the people in the choir already. So it was a fairly seamless transition to join the choir there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did that kind of affect you later on? I mean, how did that high school experience influence you?
Well, that's a really good question. It helped me a number of different ways. So I went to St. Olaf as a music major, and that, of course, was the musical and theological experience you would hope it to be. But it is quite intense. And so I was very grateful that I had 2 or 3 years to become familiar with congregational song and kind of get the basics down before I went there. But certainly the choral experience there was outstanding. And I sang in the freshman. So when you're a first year student at St. Olaf, the first year women sing in Manitou Singers, first year men sing in Viking Chorus, and then you can go on to one of the other upper class choirs. So I sang in Manitou Singers my freshman year under Sig Johnson, who was probably one of the finest musicians I've ever seen. Unfortunately, she passed away a few years ago, but she was a tremendous influence on me. And then went on to sing in the St. Olaf choir. And then my senior year, too late, not too late, but I wish I'd started earlier. I'd started organ with Ruth Ferguson, and that was just a tremendous eye-opening experience, and one I wish I'd started earlier, but it was really a wonderful year.
It strikes me that, both in high school and in college, your contact with those two experiences were also sort of early experiences with congregational song as well, right? I mean, you, I just wonder, what was that like to kind of go into a church and like people are singing?
Uh, well, it was all new to me,
Yeah.
right? It's not like I had favorites. Um, so I just kind of absorbed everything as I went along. Certainly at St. Olaf, when you had daily chapel and weekly church services, and then of course the Christmas festival where you have thousands of people singing at once. You certainly get immersed in that. And I think I don't know if this is still true, but any student at St. Olaf will be able to sing "Lord, whose love and humble service," because that had to be the anthem for the chapel services there for the years
Really?
that I was there. Um, but it was a wonderful way to just be steeped in everything that was available.
Yeah. When I think of St. Olaf choirs, I mean, it seems like so much repertoire is hymn based, uh, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's
And
interesting.
and because it was new to me, I didn't always know that,
Uh-huh.
but until later, I thought, oh, I've sung that before, and then I realized that, of course, it had been based on that. So I think sometimes my experience was a little bit flipped, um, but it all comes out in the wash.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Now you mentioned that you learned to play the organ in your senior year. So did you put that to use in churches?
I did. I did. Blessings on them that put up with with my playing. But yeah, I played for an ELCA church, which had actually a very unusual relationship with the local Missouri Synod congregation, and so sometimes I would sub over there if they needed me. So that was a bit unusual. And then I went on to play for United Methodist and American Baptist congregations. Once I took the position up here at Ohio State Lima, I would do some substituting, but then that largely melted away.
Uh-huh. I've
So
heard five different denominations mentioned so far. So you got a lot of ecumenical experience along the way, huh?
yeah, yeah, it was great. It really was great. I mean, I learned so much at each of them, and I think that's what I enjoy about the Hymn Society is that you just keep doing that. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you were certainly well prepared for the ecumenical atmosphere,
right.
environment of the Hymn Society.
Yeah,
So, so you with your music degree in hand, you went on to study musicology then, huh?
yeah. I went to Ohio State on the Columbus campus and spent 2 years in that program, and I enjoyed it, and I had a wonderful advisor, and I enjoyed the luxury of just kind of pursuing musicology. But the turning point for me, which I didn't realize until later, was a class in bibliography and research methods. So every graduate student in the School of Music had to take this class, which was taught by the music librarian. And you were supposed to pick a topic and find everything you could find on the topic and come back with a stack of index cards, again, the 90s, listing everything that you found on it. And so I kind of went bananas with this project and had the time of my life, finding everything. And at the end of the semester, the day came to turn in the projects, and everybody else's project was, maybe this big little pile of index cards, and mine was about as long as my arm. And I set it down on the table, and I was just stunned. I didn't realize that I was about the only person who liked this class. I thought everybody loved it as much as I did, but I was wrong. And so anyway, at that moment, I thought, you know what? I liked the research. I liked doing the research very much. Um, but that was kind of a turning point where I thought, okay, now I seem to really like this. I seem to really like this this element of research. Maybe I should reconsider my career goals. And so I finished up the musicology degree again, happily, and then kind of made the left turn into the library science program, and it was the best decision I ever made.
Hmm. And were you able to incorporate your musicology work as you pursued library science? How did they come together?
Um, it came together, well, in a couple of different ways. So to finish up the library science degree, you had to either write a thesis or do a project. Well, I'd already written a thesis. I wasn't keen to write another one. So I thought, well, fine, I'll do a project, but I didn't know what to do. But as I had made that original project with the index cards, that's when I had really discovered the Hymn Society, because a lot of the resources that I found on my topic had been published in the hymn. And so that's what alerted me to the Hymn Society. And I thought, well, this sounds like an interesting group of people. And so actually to back up a little bit, when I was still getting my musicology degree in '96, the conference was at Oberlin. But I couldn't afford to go to the conference, but I could afford to go to the weekend of the organ workshop that followed. And so I went to that workshop, and somebody said, well, why didn't you apply for the Lovelace Scholarship? Well, I'd never heard of the Lovelace Scholarship. And so then the following year in '97, I applied for the Lovelace Scholarship and went to Savannah. And so by the time I started my library degree, I'd been to a conference, found this group of people who were just amazing. So then to catch back up to my library project, I thought, well, I'll just send Carl Daw an email. He was executive director at the time, and say, hey, is there anything library-ish that I could do? And
You
so
asked the right person.
I did. And so he said, absolutely, there is. And so he suggested that I update this publication called Hymnal Collections of North America. And so I designed this database. The database itself never actually came to fruition, but the idea of it, essentially, I did update it eventually in print format. But for the project, I designed this database to update this directory of hymnal collections. And so that kind of got me on the track of how do I combine musicology and librarianship with these more bibliographic centered projects. So Carl kind of got me started on that.
That's so interesting. And then I know that you were also deeply involved in the Dictionary of North American Hymnology. I assume that came a little later, huh?
It did. So that actually came right as I came on as the director of research. So I think it was 2008, Harry Plantinga had just given a presentation on his brand new database, hymnary.org. And so I was sitting there in his audience going, my goodness, this sounds interesting. And so as I came on as director of research, the executive committee said, we'd like for you to go talk to Harry about this and see, can we perhaps coordinate with him. And so because Paul Powell had kind of been taking the lead in migrating the dictionary from print to CD-ROM and then CD-ROM into online with Bill Clemens, who had also been working to get this data online. They brought me on board as the new director of research. And so Paul Powell and I went to go meet with Harry and kind of hash out how this would all work and what the editorial guidelines, so essentially cataloging rules, would be if we were to join forces. And so Paul kind of brought me along for this transition, and really kind of, because he of course had been a cataloger for decades. He was quite the force when it came to the dictionary, and so he kind of brought me along with that project, and that's how I became involved with hymnary.
So I think probably just about everybody knows what hymnary is, but I'm guessing a lot of people don't really know what the DNAH was about. Could you
Right.
say a little bit about that?
Of course, because we should all know. But
Right, of course.
This is central to our scholarly identity, I think. So I would say outside of our journal, the dictionary was, of course, the largest scholarly project the Hymn Society has ever undertaken, and that was to index the first lines of hymnals from 1640 to 1978 to the publishing of the LBW in 1978 or 79. Lutherans, correct me.
I think it's 78.
78. That's what I thought. But in any case, but because of the limitations of technology, it was to just index the first lines of the texts, right? And so we had all this data, and of 5,000 or so hymnals, and it had been gradually making the migration from the old computer cards to CD-ROM, and then eventually online. And so when you go into hymnary and you see any kind of historical data before 1978, that's all from the dictionary. Yes, I see you, Peter. Yes. So any of the older data that you see comes from the dictionary, and so sometimes we'll go back and work on those hymnals and add tune data, add scans, all the things that hymnary makes possible, right?
Yeah.
Because of the capabilities of technology and what Harry has done with that. And so, but sometimes you'll go back and you'll see an older hymnal and you'll see the numbers of D1, D2, D3, where it just has the first lines and nothing else. Well, the D stands for Dictionary of North American Hymnology. So that's how you know that is Hymn Society data.
Interesting. Peter very well just made an interesting comment. And by the way, lots of people are saying hello. But Peter says the DNAH was aching for decades for the internet to be invented.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah,
It's finally been made manifest.
that is interesting. Now, you jumped pretty quickly from being a Lovelace Scholar to being on the executive committee and director of research.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about that, your involvement in the Hymn Society and how you came to get so involved?
Well, it was a learning curve that was almost vertical, but um, I had given some presentations. I think my first one might have been in Boston, about the database that I'd created at Carl's prompting. And then I think I'd also talked about research resources in Greencastle. So I'd been interested in this for a while, not with any particular designs, but I guess I just kind of latched onto that element of the Hymn Society, probably because I'm a librarian and that, I'm just attracted to those things. And then in 2008, got a phone call from David Eicher saying, "Would you be interested?" Are you kidding me? Absolutely. so, so I went, and really jumped in the deep end because of just by pure coincidence. That's when Harry came out with Hymnary, and so that was extremely exciting. And also in that same year, the executive committee said, "Hey, Tina, we'd like you to start this emerging scholars program." Okay. So it wasn't my idea, but it was one of the first tasks I was assigned. So it made for a busy year.
You were talking about some of the people that you were involved with along the way, including Carl and Harry, and
Mhm.
it just occurs to me, and Paul Powell, that there are these really special people in our group who've really been the core of the research dimension of the Hymn Society, and it's been such an important part, really, of the life of the Hymn Society, and a big contribution to the churches as well. Um, I'm not sure what I'm asking, except to say that, boy, the research that you have been involved in and that you and others have fostered has just made such a huge difference. Do you see that? I mean, are you aware of that as you sit in your library position?
In Lima, Ohio, no, not always.
Mm.
But it's rewarding when people say that. I mean, in recent years, not to get too far ahead in the story, and I do want to backtrack a little bit if time allows. Um, uh, what was I going to say? Oh, with my recent work on the Spanish language hymnals, I have asked the hymnary folks if they have any statistics on, has this made a difference in who is using hymnary and so forth. And it appears to have. Not that I'm the only one who has done that. I've done a lot of the work, but certainly not all of it. And it seems to have made a difference in who is using that database. And so that I find that that very rewarding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really does make. I mean, I'm sure like people who are watching right now. I mean, I can't tell you how often I just go to Hymnology for something that I'm looking for and find the answers there. It's really
Yeah.
an amazing tool. And just to kind of diverge a little bit, now your library career is not totally centered on hymns and congregational song, I assume, right? You do a lot of other things.
Well, I run a fairly standard boilerplate library, as my day job, as a regional campus of Ohio State. So we're a pretty small library. Um, our campus serves a lot of first generation students, and we we're, there's nothing too unusual about the actual library that I
Uh-huh.
run. It's a fairly standard academic library.
And are you participating in church music at all these days?
No,
Oh, okay.
I mean
Except
not
except for
except
your research.
yeah, except for hymnary and making the theses and dissertations list for the hymn society and um but actually no, and I haven't for a while, other than just regular participation, but
Yeah, your organ skills are uh,
rusty.
gotcha. Uh, um, I wonder if you could just say a little more about your work as director of research. So you were doing the DNAH and you did emerging scholars, and how do you see that? That how long has that role been existing in the Hymn Society? Do you know?
The
The
director of
director of
research,
research, yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
um I know Paul was. I'm presuming there were people
Yeah.
before him.
There probably somebody probably knows. I see Dave Viker is on this on
Okay.
watching. Maybe somebody can tell us about that. But I was just wondering if you could kind of reflect on that role in the EC and how it affects the overall life of the society.
Oh wow, that's a big question, Mike. I think it's important. Of course, I think it's important, right? But I really truly do, because I think the Hymn Society, of course, prides itself on its balance of scholarship and practice, right? And one of they each affect each other, right?
Yeah,
And they each inform each other, and so I think it's important to keep that perspective of needing practice to inform scholarship and scholarship to inform practice. And that's really the role of the director of research, is to weigh down that end, right? And remind us that we actually do have that element.
right. Peter Raywald actually said that he thinks that Paul Powell was the very first one to have that title.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
So that's interesting. So you were early in the game, right?
Right. But, hooray for librarians.
Yeah. I'm hearing from Kevin Mongones, who says that as hymnal collections become, or he's asking, are hymnal collections becoming obsolete in the digital world? What happens to all of the hymnal collections with this recent spate of college closings? Oh,
Oh, that's a big question, Kevin.
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think they're obsolete, because there's always a place for the physical object, right? So I think you can use the digital to access the physical. I think that's extremely important. And that's primarily what Hymnary does, even with its scans. But at the same time, even within the collection that I have here, um, you can open up a hymnal and there are pictures in the margins. There are notes in there. So one of my, oh gosh, I should have pulled it out. I didn't think of it. One of my very favorite notes is in a bilingual hymnal. Is it Norwegian in English? I forget. But it says something like, tell Greta the pastor, or um, tell Greta the pastor wants to see her after church. You tell her. And so it's like somebody who's playing telephone down down the row at church using their hymnal. And so there are all kinds of wonderful, very human elements in these physical items. So is there a value in a 1988 United Methodist hymnal with no markings? Probably less so, because it's very common, very easy to find. But I think we also need to remember that not everything can be digitized.
Kevin's question sort of makes me wonder, with when he talks about closings, are I mean, are there still a lot of collections in academic institutions right now?
Not as many as there used to be. Actually, as I've occasionally updated the hymnal collections of North America, the greatest drop off is in personal collections. Um, Either when a person passes away, then the collection gets disbanded, or sometimes the person will have made arrangements to donate it to an academic institution. So that's always very helpful. And certainly there are fewer than there used to be, at least to my knowledge.
You know, this is something I haven't thought of recently, but we get requests in our office from time to time from people who want to they want to unload their personal collection, but they don't want to break it up, or they don't want to see it go to recycling. And sometimes we're sort of at a loss what to recommend. And I wonder if you have any advice.
Well, it depends, because some collections have a theme and some don't, right? So
Hmm.
some people might have, I've specialized in shape note materials. I've specialized in Baptist materials, whatever it might be. And that might guide where you'd want to place it. But
You know,
it really depends on what the collection is.
it seems like some of the bigger collections are, looking for something really specific, something very rare that they can put into their collection.
Mhm.
Um, but I guess the question is sort of making me wonder, should we be directing them to other institutions that don't really have much of a collection at all that might be interested in doing something?
I can't speak for other institutions,
Of
but
course.
it depends on what their programs are and what their goals are and how they plan to support them.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry for that little diversion, but it's just
yeah,
a
no, it's an
question.
interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Peter, the silent auction can always use good collectible hymnals to support the Lovelace Scholarship Program. That is so
That's true.
true. That
Yeah.
is so true. And it is amazing. People keep buying and bidding on hymnals at the conference. So
Mhm.
anybody who's looking for hymnals, the conference is definitely the place to come. You can get a good deal on lots of hymnals that are interesting and have some value. So.
Mhm.
Well, anyway, I'd love to hear you talk a little more about your own research, and especially your more recent research. I know you mentioned a little earlier about your about Spanish language hymnals.
Yeah. So, well, I've always had a fascination with languages. So, and I should preface all this too by saying that even though I did not grow up in the church, I did grow up in a library, essentially. So the town I grew up in, Durham, New Hampshire, was the home of the University of New Hampshire, where my dad taught. And we didn't have a public library. So instead of having a public library, they had a children's room in the university library. And so I quite literally grew up going to a university library, um, as from being a little kid. And so I very quickly became accustomed to using the full facility, microfilm, microfiche, the whole card catalog, and going into the newspaper room and seeing the newspapers from all over the world in all these different languages. And so um, I think that was a very normal experience, for me, in terms of just exposure to materials from other parts of the world. Um, the other part of this is that my mother was from Germany, and so I was used to this idea of being able to express things in more than one way, and how different languages approach the same idea. Um, and and she moved back to Germany when I was 14. So after that, I had a lot of experiences in the immersion in a different language. And then in high school, I studied French and Latin, and in college, I studied Hebrew. So I think I've just always had this fascination with languages.
Hmm.
And so as I dove into hymnary, I started off, of course, with English just to kind of figure out the best way to negotiate the data in there. But then kind of found myself drawn to hymnals in languages other than English. And as I was doing that, and mostly using the hymnals in the collection that I had here, because of course I had easy access to them. But then it became clearer to me that a lot of the Spanish language hymnals, and I'm guessing it was probably because of something that happened in the data migration from one format to the other, that accents were missing, tildes were missing, and it kind of grated on me. this
You're such
this
a librarian.
this is really bugging me, y'all. And so I started to kind of clean that up and add the tune data and add the scans if I could, and things like that. And I just kind of kept going until I'd either edited or added the data for about 50 different titles, and which I found just fascinating because, of course, there were authors and composers that were not familiar to me. And so I got especially interested in the composers that I saw because so many of them were women, which was, not uncommon, but not terribly common for a lot of the hymnals that I had been familiar with. Um, and so by using the data in hymnary, I was able to say, okay, who are some of these women, and have they been addressed in the literature? And some of them had been somewhat in dissertations in the 60s and things like that, but not widely. And so by using that data, I tried to use that as a case study, saying you can use data to surface people who merit more attention in our scholarship. And because I've been working so much in the Spanish hymnals, that seemed like a natural case study. So in recent years, so that took me 5 or 6 years, I want to say. And then I got a nudge saying, that's great, but what about our Brazilian colleagues? And so I've shifted my attention to Portuguese language within the past year. So hopefully we'll see great improvements in that in the coming months and years.
So I'm curious, the hymnals that you are working with, are they mostly the U.S. Based, or are they from all over the Spanish-speaking world?
They're from all over. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, of course, with the Dictionary of North American Hymnology, the ones that I started with had been published in North America.
I see.
And then I kind of expanded the coverage to whatever I could get my hands on.
Well, and I'm grateful to you for this work for a lot of reasons. I mean, it's so necessary. The United States Spanish is such an important part of our church language. And
Mhm.
also, I don't know if people know this, that it's thanks to you that we have two new fellows at last year who, both women, and both of whom are responsible in many ways for the production of both Protestant and Catholic hymnals in Spanish, Raquel Martinez and Mary Frances Reza. And they're also on, by the way, on the list for interviews during this current season, which is something. So, I mean, your research has had a lot of impact, I think.
Yeah, I was thrilled to see that the EC agreed that they should be named fellows. So,
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I want to go back for a second to this whole question of director of research, because Paul Richardson, our historian, is weighed in, and so I'm just going to read what he wrote. When the Hymn Society was reorganized in 1976, there was a research committee headed by a chair. The first in that role was Stanley Yoder. He was followed by Mary Oyer rather, Carl Schalk, Nicholas Temperley, Catherine Nichols, and Bert Pullman. The title Director of Research was introduced in 1994 with Carol Pemberton. She was followed by Paul Powell, Peter Raywalt, and you. So
nice.
there's the authoritative word on that. So
Good.
thank you, Paul, for helping us to get to situate all of this in our history.
Mhm.
So, um, so I'm trying to think if there was somewhere else we needed to go with Spanish language hymnals. Are, are you seeing more of these coming around? Spanish language hymnals.
But I, more of them coming around.
Yeah, I mean, do you see an increase? Are you discovering more? And
Oh yes, yes. I mean, there are a lot of them out there. I literally have a stack on my desk behind me that
uh-huh.
need attention. Um, so, and then I have another pile in another corner of my office that need to be cataloged, um, and they'll need attention too. So, yeah, it never stops. It won't stop. So,
I'm curious, do you see certain countries being more that are producing more hymnals than others?
I don't know. I don't know
Okay,
enough. I don't know enough about it to be able to say.
okay, I'm just curious. I mean, my husband and I go to church pretty much every Sunday to a Spanish language service, so I'm really kind of curious about the development of congregational song in Spanish-speaking communities today.
Mhm.
Um, Okay, so actually, Paul Richardson said, this sort of information lies behind a paywall that can be readily accessed with a contribution to the Hymn Society. So, uh, well, I wonder if there's anything else that I missed as we were going through this today. You were
Um,
hoping we
I,
would talk about.
well, I did want to mention because it's not necessarily hymn society related, but of course, so little of this can happen without a faith life, right?
Hmm. Right.
And so since I kind of got a later start, I did especially want to mention that at St. Olaf, I had some wonderful mentors and wonderful professors, but it was really my roommate's family that made a huge difference for me in terms of getting me engaged with an
Hmm.
actual faith life. And her name was Lucy Grauber, and her name is Lucy Stoicky now. And her parents, John and Elise Grauber, her grandmother Mary Hinderly, her aunts and uncles, her cousins, her brothers. She had an enormous family, and at least from my perspective, and they kind of swept me up and carried me along and exposed me. And I've been struggling for such a long time to describe what it was that they showed me. And it was this kind of open and thoughtful and, if I say profoundly joyous faith, I don't know if that quite describes it, but they exposed me to this in such a way that really made a huge difference just in terms of how I approach um, all of this work. And so I did think it was important to mention that.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, it really goes to how much faith and um, faith is really so related to testimony and not just verbal, but just the way people treat you and the way they
Mhm.
include you and the way they I don't know, show you things, a way of life that you might not have considered before, and that's a very powerful testimony. Um, and I guess we always hope that our singing life has that kind of power, that it's tied to the way we live and the way we interact with one another.
Yeah. So that they're very much a hymn society style family,
Yeah,
if you can imagine such
it's
a thing.
this
So
is scary, but I know what you mean.
right.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Uh,
it was important to me to mention them.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Um, I, one last question from me, and that is, you know, as we look forward to our the years ahead in the Hymn Society, what would be your fondest hope?
I think that's pretty predictable. I think
That's okay.
my, my fondest hope would be that our scholarly work would continue and that we continue to be aware of the historical role that we play in a database like Hymnology, but also my fondest hope is that our scholarly work continues to become more international, more deliberately international, whether that's with the journal or what we write about or what languages we publish in. That would be my fondest hope.
Well, thank you. I mean, and thank you for all that you've done to really get us to this point. I mean, your contributions are significant and have made a big difference. So I'm grateful for that, and I think I express everyone's gratitude for that as well. So, and thank you for this conversation. I mean, it's you've sort of uncovered so many different dimensions of the hymn society and how we relate to one another and the impact that we're making. So I'm grateful for that too.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you for making the time.
Well, it was fun. I had fun too. Thanks for being here, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk with Tina and to I appreciate also the contributions that a number of you have made to the conversation today. Next one, we're going to be talking to David Eicher. So that's his name was mentioned earlier, and I know he's watching right now. So I look forward to talking to Dave next month. Take care, everybody, and wish everyone a blessed Easter. Bye-bye.